All right. Good morning. How's everyone doing this morning? Yay, HackerCon. Everyone awake? All right. My name's Tom Moore. This is a presentation on a project that we've been working on called the Rapid Assessment of Web Resources. And hopefully you'll find some use out of it. I'm not sure where my co-presenter is. Adam Byers is the main brain behind the coding of this project, and he's found about the most efficient way possible to be able to perform the action that this tool does. And I think each one of you should check it out. So we'll let the presentation speak for itself. But it's a rapid assessment of web resources. Right there is the Bitbucket repo. If you want to pull it, new pushes were put out last night that include some of the added functionality that we're going to cover this morning in the presentation. So here's our quick agenda. We're going to go over the web assessments piece of it, what's involved in a web assessment. We're going to take a look at RAWR, the tool itself, and how it's built. And then we're going to do a quick demo, how easy it is to set up, what kind of enumeration it can perform, what kind of data it can get you, and then conclusion, discussion, any added features that you guys think may be possible, bring them up to that point, and we'll definitely add them to the agenda if it's within the scope of the project. So why should we worry about the web? If you don't know what your organization's web attack surface is, please expect that someone else probably already does. The purpose of web is that it's publicly accessible, right? That's our portal to allow everyone to see the information that we have out there for them to see. The difference is now, compared to what it was, is that most web ends most web front ends are tied into potentially very sensitive databases on the back end. These databases may have sensitive data that they contain themselves, or they may allow an inlet into your organization's internal network that you don't want exposed. So we need to take a look at these web interfaces. Most of the breaches that have taken place over the past 2 years, 3 years, are due to crappy web development, for lack of a better word. And so we want to make sure that we're taking a look at our organizations that we're responsible for. So you're given an objective for your organization, and this is going to be different for everyone because I'm sure we all work for different size organizations, but you're given an objective to assess your organization's internal and external web-based attack surface. Okay? What all does that involve? How do you get started? How are you going to organize your data? How are you going to segment that information and keep it in a format that's parsable, that works? Your end goal is to produce a report that can be provided both technical and technical individuals as well as executives. And those are two completely separate reports. If you're providing the report to an executive that you're going to give to the technical staff of the organizations that you're testing, you're doing it wrong. I'm going to tell you right now, the execs are going to look at it, they don't care. The execs want to know, high level, how's this impact business? What's the dollar amount that's going to be required to either fix, mitigate, or what could potentially be our cost if breached. So this tool hopefully will be able to drastically assist in that process. So here are the different phases of a process of performing an assessment on web-based. You've got your recon, your mapping, your discovery, your exploitation, your reporting, and most tools that we have are not going to assist with all of these. Most tools that we have are not going to tie in easily with one another either, to be able to allow us to organize our information, collect our thoughts, and be able to present it in a fashion that's going to be actionable to the organization we're testing. So, what tools do you know of that perform mapping? Interaction. ANSI. Nmap, right? What other tools perform mapping? unicorn scan. So yeah, so we've got several that perform that. Burp Suite is another. We can do Burp Suite. We can do OpenZap. There are a lot of web-based tools that we can leverage. NIC2, W3AF. We can use a lot of tools for mapping. But have you ever used those tools and then tried to tie their content together? Right. I heard a laugh. That's the point. It's very tough to get that information. Discovery is another piece of it. I mean, and sometimes they're intertwined, but most of the time, those tools that we were using and leveraging to perform those pieces have nothing to do with the last piece. They don't care about how you're going to put your report together. They're just worried about getting you the data that they're focusing on. They're not getting you your information in a normalized fashion. So how much work would be involved in obtaining output that could be considered acceptable for both your extended audiences, or intended audiences? You're collecting most of the technical piece of it. How much time, for those of you that perform pen testing, how much time, percentage-wise, of your assessment goes into producing the report? Right. I see wide arms back there. And that's right. I mean, we should be reporting the entire time that we're going through this. And so I'm not fond of reporting. I'm going to go ahead and say that right here. So one of the biggest frustrations that I had, and I worked for a very large organization that we were doing this in, so this tool set is extremely extendable. You can run it against the wide open internet if you want, as long as you have enough storage and bandwidth and transfer. But it is extremely extensible. But what I like about it is that the end goal is what it was developed for. The end goal of making sure that we had all of our information organized, structured, easily parsable, and in a format that we could then take and just modify slightly and start putting it out on the table for both parties. So executives like the visuals and the numbers, and then the technical, is the speak for the remediation and mitigation pieces that people are going to get into. So what's your turnaround time? So how many of you, just a show of hands, how many of you think that your internal organization has 50 internal websites? 100. 200. Yeah. Any web interface, all right, internal to your organization, how many of you have any idea what your internal interfaces look like? Has anyone mapped them? I don't see nearly enough hands. Yeah, China probably has. What about your external web interfaces? You probably know those pretty well, right? You probably have a pretty decent idea of what's out there. You know the ones that your company promotes, but have you checked to see if there are other ones that maybe Bob in accounting stood up that you don't know, that lets him into his, documents that could be sensitive to the organization? Most of us aren't mapping this stuff out. Most organizations that I've talked to are not mapping this information out. So let's, we're going through mapping. We're going through formatting the data. These are the different pieces in this turnaround time of performing this assessment that just add up and add up. We map, we format the data, we identify the targets of interest, right? We do additional information collection on those targets of interest, and then we format the data again. And then we do the validation of the findings. And then most likely, actually, we format the data again, and then we go back and perform the composing of the report that we're going to produce. That's our end goal. It's extremely time consuming, especially in a large organization. And I know this may come off wrong, but I would almost anticipate that you probably have 300 to 500% of the web interfaces on your internal network than what you think you do. And that's a low estimate in my opinion. So why are we asking so many questions? Because we think we've solved them. At least the enumeration discovery piece of it, and integrating that into the into the reporting piece. So web assessments, you perform your recon. So you find out what your IP scope are, or what your IP scope is, what your domain names are that you're looking for. That you perform outside of RAWR, right? You get your IP scopes, you get everything together, and then you feed them into RAWR. RAWR can take them in multiple inputs. So you can give it an nmap XML file. You can use Nexpose XML, Nessus XML, OpenVAS, Qualys, pretty much anything that we could think of that might already be scanning your network. We built an interpreter that will pull that data in and parse it out correctly, and allow RAWR to be able to work on that as a list of targets to go after. So it inputs the data. It extracts as much of the intelligible information as possible out of that content, and then it also pulls in the DP database, geolocation information of where the potential IP addresses are that you're looking at, and it also has crawl, which will crawl through a website or spider a website. It has different modules that are being developed, and it pulls in DNS as well. Okay, so all of these things play into it. One of the cool things we've done with DNS is how many of you have played with the IP colon function of Bing? Okay, if you have, who has a website that you know of that runs on shared hosting? How many of you want to know who your neighbors are on that server? Right? If they're vulnerable, most likely you're vulnerable too, just through proxy. Right? If they get compromised and someone gets access to that server, they could take your site down too. So that's one of the other pieces that it does. If you go to Bing and you type in IP colon and put in your IP address, it'll give you a list. Well, RAWR will do that on the fly for you if you provided an IP address. It'll go through and also see who else is all co-locating on that same server with you. So that's pretty cool. So you take your input, then it performs the enumeration. The enumeration piece, RAWR will perform all the scanning for you. You can perform the scanning previously and just feed it a file, or you just give it the range and the attributes that you want to collect, and it'll perform that scanning for you. But the output is what's huge. We have an HTML report that shows you a lot of information. This tool will go through the web interfaces that you provide. It'll screenshot them via Phantom.js, or it can also leverage Ghost, and it'll go through that process of performing that screenshot. Adam Byers, ladies and gentlemen, he's the brain behind this project, guys. I'm going to let him talk about the code for a little bit. You all right?
I can catch my breath, brother.
So there's a lot here. We've got the regular HTML report that gets kicked out with all your screenshots. It provides you a lot of contextual information about each of the web interfaces as well. You've got the CSV format, and it is structured. How many of you have run WhatWeb? It's a great tool, but it's not very good if you run it against a large number of IP addresses. It's not structured. You can't run it against a range and then expect to just be able to look at one column of data and it all be the same content. That's one of the things that we sought to fix through this process. And so the CSV format is very, very easy to search through. It's actually my worksheet that I go through when I'm performing the rest of the assessment. The attack surface matrix is great. We'll see all these here in a little bit. The attack surface matrix basically puts your IP addresses down one side, your ports, your services on the top, and then it just puts little X's where those services are active on those specific servers. And it's amazing because you can say, oh, well, all of these servers are probably built the same way because they're running the same exact services. These are differently set up And so if this one's vulnerable, most likely all of these are too. So it gives you more of a high-level visibility of it at a port-based level of the attack surface. The sitemap diagram will actually use Python pygraph viz and go through. If you tell it to spider your website, it'll go through and it'll spider it, and it will create a map of basically a sitemap of your site, and it'll output it in the PNG format. This is great, actually, because I've found authentication bypass on websites with this before. Right? It's looking through and it's sliding out through everything, and you've got all these pages that you can't get to because you haven't authenticated, but wait, this one back here is accessible. It lets you get right through, and it helps you find those things pretty quickly. We're dumping the data into a shelf database, which is a Python native database. We have anticipation to move that into like a Postgres database at some point in time, and make it more extensible so that you can perform a scan and then a month later perform the same scan and see what changed. Would that be useful? Right? So some of that stuff is in the works. JSON objects. If you want to get access to the JSON pieces of it, you get your nmap OA output, which is the XML, GNmap, and nmap outputs. So whatever format you want, it's kicked out there. That's if you perform the scan through RAWR. If you just provide RAWR an XML file, then you're only going to have what you provided it in the directory there. It'll snatch all the cookies. Yesterday, Lee Baird covered snagging the robots.txt, right? We grabbed that as well. It's in here. Crossdomain.xml is another one that kind of gives you visibility of some directories that may not be scanned by the search engines, but could potentially be something you want to look at. It has the ability to mirror a website. How many of you have had the need to mirror a website and wget can't get it? So this will also perform mirroring through the spidering function. It just maintains all the data that it pulls down. It can do SSL certificate. Basically, it'll validate the ciphers of the SSL certificates that are utilized by secure web services and provide that data to you. It'll actually also download the cert and keep it for you in case you want to inspect it later. New to this release that was pushed out last night is Meta Report. How many of you have run a tool like Foca to pull meta from a website? So one of the things, and I love Foca, I love Foca, but one of the things that frustrated me about Foca was having to set up a Windows box with Crystal Reports and VB.net and building out this whole environment just so that you can run meta against a website. Adam's pulling all that stuff on the fly through Python, and it's a pretty cool report. You'll get to see one here in just a little bit. And then you've got the sec headers report, so the security headers of your HTTP websites. You can take a look at all the security headers and see what things are not set securely, and utilize that. Who developed that?
Excuse me. Good morning, by the way. SmeegeSec came up with that. A nice little HTML report to show by site, and there are a lot of common security headers. And he's got sort of a pass-fail green-red type thing. You'll see that a little later, but it comes in real handy, especially if you're an administrator or somebody that's just trying to do a survey of these sites. It'll say, okay, well, they kind of failed in that they gave up that their boxes run a Debian in their Apache strings, their server versioning strings. So it's really helpful. He's a smart cat, so I appreciate the buttons. Use that.
And you want to finish it? Go ahead.
Sure. I think you deserve the lion's share of that. But, the last one would be the word list. I figured, hey, since we're pulling this down, we might as well take... Oh, really? Okay. How you doing, man? Can you hear me now? Okay. I love you, man. Okay, so the last thing, and I appreciate Tom for doing this. I obviously had trouble this morning. So the word lists are I figured, hey, since we're pulling the HTML, I messed that up. Pulling the HTML down anyway, we're pulling all these documents. Why not take every word in there, chop it up, take out all the common HTML headers and whatnot, and put it into a word list. This way you can feed this into, say, you can feed it into your brute force attempt to try to log into the site. Because how many times have you had that work? What's the script? The Ruby script that does that already? Cool. Yeah, so cool. Yeah, cool does some of the same thing, and with RAWR we're working on that. We're working toward the same functionality. All right. So we're feeding all the information in from your recon. This is basically going out to these sites, and if you use attack A, did you already tell them that? Okay, if you use attack A with RAWR, it's not just recording the web ports. It's actually including into the attack surface matrix. You've got every port that you have there, so it'll go ahead and perform reconnaissance on the web ports, just as taking screenshots and things like that. But it'll include all the other ports in your report, right? And we'll see that in a little bit. And then you can go on to the mapping, discovery, your exploitation. Well, you can carry that information forward and use it later on in your assessment. Now, RAWR is kind of like me in a lot of respects. There's going to be some problems sometimes, just like everybody has. But we're feeding all that into error.log. And we've also got a .log file named RAWR_ the date and .log. And a lot of things get fed into that too. It's more like a verbose mode. So you can find any kind of problems you're having in that error.log. And you can also find them in the RAWR.log, because we tried to keep the console output pretty, except for, pertinent errors and warnings and things like that. So everything else you'll find in these logs. So I think that may be it. That part.
So let's take it for a spin here real fast. I recorded a video, but we're just gonna rock it live here. Let's see. All right, so this is a Kali box, and we're just going to walk through the process of pulling it down from the repo. So if you have Kali up, feel free to follow along. This is going to get RAWR set up on your machine. So basically, I'm just going to switch out to the op directory. So you can see I don't have RAWR currently installed. So we're going to pull it from the repo. So git clone, and then https bitbucket.org/alias, which is AL14S, and then RAWR.git. And it's GIT. All right, in the last slide, we'll have our contact information, Twitter information, and the repo information on the last slide. So if you want to wait until then to capture that information, feel free. We're going to go ahead and pull this down. All right, so we're going to cd into the RAW directory. And we can see what pulled up there. We have an install shell script, so we're going to go ahead and run that. And it sees some dependencies that we don't have currently on our machine, so we're going to go ahead and hit Y. It's pulling down Python, PyGraph Viz, LXML.
Those should be the only two dependencies you really have. Ghost, you have to pull down Qt4 and the virtual frame buffer if you don't have a screen.
And the script will do that for you if you don't have it.
Yeah, it'll do those.
So it also sees that we need to pull down Phantom.js, so we'll hit Y there. and we need intro music or something. It'll take. You don't want me singing, brother. I'm seeing some techno. Boots and pants and boots and pants and boots and pants. Alright, so here we go. We've got that pulled down. And the next piece, it sees that we need the DPE database. Hit Y. No, you want to talk about the DPE database?
So the DPE database is a project to document default passwords based on CPE information. Is anybody, you guys familiar with CPE information? Okay, well, basically it's a way to profile a service as it's running on a remote host, and I guess I can show you an example of that later. But say it's Apache, then it sets it in a category of Apache, and then it says, okay, it's 2.2, sets it in that category, so that you can come along later and say, okay, here's a list of default passwords for all of these different CPEs. It was a lot better than my attempt to do it through the DefPass sheet, so and it actually directly matches it up with services that are quote-unquote vulnerable, right? So if it shows up there, then 99% of the time that is the default password for that interface. So,
and then in the IP to country CSV basically will relate the top level IP schema to the country of origin. So we'll hit Y there. And that's it. You just run. Oh, okay. Okay, so it also creates a symbolic link in there, so you could just type in RAWR. Maybe not. So /RAWR, right? /RAWR.py. And so it brings it up, and you see our cute little dinosaur there. So that's it. That's installing it. Is that too hard? No, takes care of pretty much everything for you, I think. So let's scan something with it, right? We're gonna scan Adam's website. It's called canhascode.com, and so you'll get to see the input here. So we're gonna run RAWR.py. Actually, just to show you, you can run TAC-H, and it will bring up all of the usage options for you to be able to see what your options are. Still working on the DNS piece with the AXFR, so don't expect that to be fully functional yet. It's a little beta, but we're going to get that knocked out hopefully very soon. But so let's run it. So /RAWR.py, and I'm going to give it canhascode.com. And I'm going to do a TAC-P for the ports that I want to run. How many of you have heard of the FuzzDB database? They have a list of ports for common web services. We're just going to feed it FuzzDB. But this will also take the common nmap, arguments. So 80, 443, it'll run. You can run top 50, so you can run like tac top space or tac top tac space 50. Anyways, the same nmap argument that you would run to run against the top 50 ports. You can feed that here. You can also just say all, and it'll run against the 65, 535 port range of your environment. Or you can just provide comma-separated items. And the default ones that run are 80, 443, 8080, and 8443. So it catches the majority of your web interfaces there. But the FuzzDB also catches some of your databases that may be out there as well. So it's fun that way. So we'll run it that way, and we're also going to do TAC-O, which will pull the options that we have available through that HTTP server. We're going to run TAC-R, which will pull our robots.txt. And we're going to do X, which will pull our cross-domain.xml. And I'm also going to do TAC-A, which will make sure that all of these ports, if they're open, even if they don't have a web service on it, will be fed into our CSV to maintain that information. And then we're going to spider. So we're going to do you could do tac spider. There's another nomenclature, so you can do capital S and then a number from 1 to 5 on the spider intensity. All of the settings for that are in a settings file that I'll have Adam show you here in just a little bit, that you can dig in and change some of that information, but we're just going to run tac spider. It has an option to downgrade. HTTP servers are generally more talkative if you take them down to an HTTP 1.0 rather than a 1.1. So if we can get that information, let's snag it while we're doing it. And then we can also pull SSL information with tac SSLV. I don't think it'll pull anything on this server, so I've run it on another one that we'll look at the content from that here in a little bit. So let's go ahead and kick it off. It's going to run your Nmap scan. And so it sees 80, 443, and 81. Yeah. So one other piece real fast before Adam gets up is the when you're running this this scan, well, go ahead and fill them in on that while it's running.
Done before I get done. Right. Totally forgot what I was going to say. Gosh. Nice. Well, go ahead, man. Yeah, I totally lost it.
So you can see the whole process here, right? You can see it performs the scan. So that part is noisy from an IDS interface. IDS, IPS. That's going to make some noise. But everything that follows that are all legitimate requests. So if you've mapped out your environment with Nmap or Nessus or anything like that, and you just feed that file in and run it, your IDS, IPS sensors aren't going to see a thing. Because every request we're making through this whole process here of pulling the pages, pulling the options files, screenshotting, spidering, we're going against valid documents that are present on the server. And it's cake. It does not show up on an IDS IPS. So red teamers out there, it's a good way to capture a lot of information, especially if you already have pre-existing scan data, without triggering any alarms.
So about the inputs, you saw how you put canhescode.com in there, and it resolved, say, like the PTR, it resolved perfor.net, obviously the shared hosting provider. If you feed it a URL, http canhescode.com/index.php or whatever, it will start with that URL for going the Nmap scan. He mentioned earlier, I can only assume that if you do a TAC-F and feed it a Nessus file, XML file, or if you feed it your Qualys port services scan, it'll also do the same and forego the Nmap scan because you already have the data. So that comes in handy.
So we mentioned real quickly, and we may or may not go through this data, but so we see right here that his IP address is this, right? If we, and I don't know if it's going to run through, I'm going to take it back down to just the default ports. Okay. And we're going to run it against that IP. I thought it would. Oh, okay. Hang on. My bad. It's not catching our control C. So, hang on just a second. There we go. So, we're going to do tac DNS here. So, it's going to look to see who his neighbors are on that shared hosting. While that's running, let's look at some of the reporting real fast. Well, you can see this hitting right now. So it's doing the Bing reverse DNS. We'll come back to it here in just a minute. So let's look at some of the reporting. So this is the report that was generated off of his scan, and that may be very bright and hard to see. I can increase those by size a little bit. Basically, it creates a screenshot. If it doesn't have a screenshot, it comes up with this big ugly guy. But it creates a screenshot of your site. You can click on it. It brings it right up for you so that you can see it. If you go underneath of it, you can click on Open, and that is at the very bottom of the screen there. You can click on Open, and it'll open up that web interface for you. You can hit I, and it will show you all the information that was gathered regarding that page. And you can also build input lists within this environment. So if you want to go after, let's kill that. If you want to go after this guy, you can click on the little plus minus. And then if you want to go after this guy, you can click on the little plus minus. And then you can come up here to the list, and it'll show you those in a IP :port and comma separated list that you can use in other tools. So the other reports that we have here are, we have the security headers piece. So this is the security headers that we were looking at and talking to a little bit ago. They've got a lot of red. They've got their the service is not set up. They're all undefined, so it's not necessarily extremely vulnerable, but you can go in and define these and definitely increase the security stature of your web interface. It gives you your Nmap XML right here in the web interface, and then the other piece is this is a bunch of the server information. This is the primary worksheet that I work out of. CSV format gives you your URL, IP address, port number, what options are there, return codes. It goes for a while with any information it's able to capture, and it's all structured. You're not going to find unaligned columns here, but it really looks good if you look at a larger scan. All right, so this is a scan that I ran against Linode last night. How many of you heard of Linode? All right, so this is against their Linode user segment, and we found some pretty cool stuff, right? Let's see, where was it? I found several sites that have been popped by an individual that was giving out his email address saying, hey, I can help you fix this. Yeah, that's one way. So there's your screenshots. We've got PHP admin. Yay. At least it was password protected. I did not set. I'm not going any further than that. So when we do this, if you scan a large environment, that's way too much junk for a single page. So this entire report is paginated. So I can click on 2 and 3 and 4 and go right down the line here and see all kinds of web interfaces in an easy to use format. So this one right here has an M underneath of it. That's our map. So I don't know, I haven't looked at this yet, but that's what the mapping looks like that it generates. So it gives you the source in the blue circle, and then all the pages that are linked to it, linked off of it, are there.
Okay, so about these diagrams, and they can get to looking like a spaghetti sandwich sometimes if you get too many of them. We're working on that. But you'll see that these are outlined in orange. That means that is an external, that's an external link. Now on this one, you're going by the IP address, and I guess that's the domain name would be one of these, but we're detecting that as external because it's different from that. But on, let's see if we can find another one. Yep, nope, same thing.
Default.
Yeah.
Go to like one of these sites and see.
Yeah, I'm really. There we go. Now this is going to be, So they do come out pretty cool looking sometimes.
They're all in your directory structure too, so you can.
Wrong one.
You can go out and browse through them in the directory structure that's logged. The log folder is created with the timestamp. So if you run a couple scans and it fails, just keep running them. It's not going to overwrite your data. It's just going to create a new folder. Yeah, some of them are huge.
Yeah, you probably don't want to look at these in IE or whatever this is, Firefox. But yeah, they pretty much have a flat website apparently.
Everything's leaked off the main page.
Oh wait. So you probably want to look at that in an image viewer that's got some sort of mouse scroll wheel focusing, zoom in, zoom out.
But they're good visibility pieces that you can put in your report and assist with that piece to show you what. Yeah. So Excel is apparently not happy now, but I had the Excel files up from those. Let me pull one of them up here real fast. So we'll look at the attack surface matrix from the Linode scan.
When you're looking at these attack surface matrices, you'll see a lot of patterns. So when you're inside an organization and you see 2 or 3 that are patterned exactly alike, say they both have, 8080, 3306, where's a couple of these? I mean, you can say, okay, hey, these may be, I don't know, these may be clustered, they may be configured exactly alike. I mean, you see a lot of patterns as to how they implement their servers. It's pretty cool.
And then here's your meat and potatoes of your scan against the Linode segment. And so all of this data is out here, and I leave a notes column in so that I can work out of this sheet and notate the things that I found on each of these web interfaces and then work from there. But if you go over, you've got links to the diagrams. It tells you if there are web login forms there. If it's basic authentication, it'll capture a lot of that data for you fairly quickly. And so that scan, I think, took about an hour last night, running against a Class C and against the FuzzDB segment of ports. So not extremely long, but I think this tool solves a lot of the issues that were there in the realm of making sure that that we're able to capture the needed information and do it in a way that is functional and workable. So I'll let you finish up. Sure.
Okay, so we had a couple of talks, and they were pretty good talks. I really enjoyed Lee's rundown of Bash, and I'm going too far. Jesus. The time's important, and what it'd be great, and that's a lot of how I got into coding itself, is by seeing a problem and saying, okay, well, what can I do to solve that? Say a repetitive task. I've gotten lazy, so anytime I have to do like a task more than once, it's like, okay, how am I going to automate this? But I mean, just pick up a language. I mean, you've got quite a few choices out there. First I chose VB Script, and it was PowerShell and Python. But I mean, pick one, maybe one that you've got guys around that are good at it, that can kind of throw you a bone once in a while, and automate a small task. What were some of the things we were talking about yesterday? Like Brian. Brian Toby, man, he was rocking out a nice update script for his specific update script for Kali. He was doing a good job, man, and he was learning by it. It was some good stuff. Even some of the stuff Lee was talking about yesterday. You're wanting to do a little bit of recon. You just want your own custom script. Yeah, knock that out. That's how you learn, right? I learned quite a bit just by making RAWR about Python. Just learn by doing, no matter how small the task. You've got guys in the community, guys and gals in the community that be willing to throw you a bone. I mean, hit me up on Twitter, alias. Be glad to help you solve a problem or get over one of those speed bumps. But yeah, pick that up. That'll make your job so much easier, because you're not worrying about all these repetitive tasks that you have to go back and do, and you can focus on the things that really require your creative thinking, rather than creatively thinking the same problem every time. So it's helped me become a little more effective. Our plans for the future, you probably already hit a lot of these. Okay. So, yeah, he mentioned scan comparisons earlier. We're looking at incorporating Google Dorks into the document search, the DNS XFR. So right now, if it is an external address, it's going to grab the Bing data off of it, like we were doing earlier. Something happened, I guess, with resolution or something. I don't know what went on. But if it sees that it's a local, like a non-routable IP, it's going to pull up and try to do a transfer on any identified DNS servers. We're looking at integrating it into Postgres. Brian was showing me Veil, and what was the other framework? Layer. So we're looking at trying to integrate with some of those things. Lee's Discover script, we're trying to get it to where you can.
Lee's actually going to implement us in the active portion of his Discover script. So I've got Lee's Discover script. I'm sure very soon we'll have that pushed out to GitHub. And when you update his script, it'll pull RAWR right in. And when you perform the active reconnaissance, it'll go through and pull RAWR down and do the web portion of your web reconnaissance. Right.
So if you're pulling, you can pull RAWR inline, spit out the JSON output. Just so you know, I mean, I didn't make RAWR to be an island, but more or less to be something that gathers all the information you're going to need for a web assessment and some of the information you'd need for just a general recon of all the ports. Dynamic thread count. I know there's a lot of devices out there like the Pwn plug, maybe mobile devices and things like that that have less memory. Maybe, how much do you have on yours? Like 2 gigs?
Yeah. My VPS has a little bit of problems with it. We didn't show the settings dot high, but it's inside the conf directory. And you can go in there, and it's very easy to modify your variables. But I generally set my thread count down to like 10 on my VPS. It's by default 25, which runs like a champ on a VM. But my VPS, it's a little bit less capable. So I drop that down. It still runs like a champ, and but it doesn't exceed its resources when it's running. So.
Okay. And just for reference, 10 is about the sweet spot for a Pwn plug. So, but this dynamic thread count, we're looking at, every time a thread completes, it's going to look and say how much memory is available. And if it's below a certain point, we'll say, okay, we'll go ahead and spin this thread down for now. Or if it's, above a certain limit that you'll be able to set, it'll say, okay, let's spin up another thread and widen this just a little bit. So working on a little bit of, getting more smarter there. So better crawling, right? Sometimes, and anybody that's ever written Spider or you've ever tried to configure something like Web Inspect or whatever, you know that you get stuck on URLs that are different, but that they have different variables and things like that. So I do have some things in place to sort of mitigate that, and it does stay on track for the most part. But if you get a big site, something like Google, you better be prepared to have, maybe 4 or 5 years to have that thing complete, right? Because you've got all their content database, you've got their entire search. Yeah, so that can take a while. So looking on better crawling, maybe something to be database driven to sort of store, that's sort of the Postgres integration there, but to store which links you visited, to get a little bit smarter there. And yeah, that's what we've got planned.
There's all the information. If you want the GitHub or Bitbucket repository, it's right there. The little dinosaur has his own Twitter handle. That's right there as well. So if you want to follow it whenever there are pushes out to Git that are out to Bitbucket, it'll show up there. Our contact information is there. If you need to yell at someone, hit me up, I guess.
You can switch those around, right? I was the one that was late, so give him all the praise comments and cash donations. Well, give him the comments and the praise. And then, the cash donations can go to an arranged hate mail. I'll take both of those. So
yeah, but give it a shot. Let us know what you think. Let us know if there's something else that you would like to see integrated into it. We've run out of time, so we can't really take questions right now, but we will be in the back if you guys have any questions. But thank you guys very much for your time this morning.
Thank you for coming. Appreciate it.